The hero party has just managed to seal the Demon Lord away, but even though this is a monumental victory, unless they can defeat him once and for all, the world will always be in danger of being destroyed. They all feel guilty for not being able to complete their mission, but their leader tells them that there's still hope because he is sure that someday in the future, a new hero will appear to carry on their legacy and finally finish the Demon Lord off for good. Several years later, the A-Rank party, Thunderpike is in the middle of a public dungeon raid, and while the two melee fighters attack, the magic users begin casting their spells. And thanks to the buffs from the party's supporter, Yuka, they are able to take a Hydra down in record time. Individually, the members of Thunderpike are already really strong, but when they work together, they are nearly unbeatable, which is part of the reason why they have so many fans. However, while they may look like the perfect team on the surface, it turns out they don't really get along as well as you'd think. In fact, after the stream ended, the Red Mage Yuka tells everyone on the team that he is quitting Thunderpike effective immediately. The party leader, Simon, asks him why he wants to leave, so Yuka explains that he isn't getting a fair cut of their reward money. The money he received today is so little that he may have to start taking out payday loans, and that's a situation he doesn't want to be in. Simon tries to justify Yuka's low pay by claiming that Yuka isn't contributing enough to the party, and Barry chimes in to point out that Yuka never actually engages in any battles. All he ever does is burn through their items' durability with his pointless enchantments. Yuka can't believe Barry would call his enchantments useless, but Barry isn't the only one who feels that way. The only one who actually thinks Yuka is useful is Jamie, but that's just because he's good at setting up their streams. Camilla tells him that if he wants to be paid more, then he has to be more active as a member of the team, but Yuka doesn't think she has the right to say that since she's basically a healer, and Yuka is always protecting her in battle. The fact that they don't value the work he does is exactly why he wants to quit the party, but Simon asks him if he's really sure he can manage on his own if he leaves. He says the only reason Yuka is even B rank is because they are childhood friends and Simon did him a favor by letting him join Thunderpike, and even if he leaves, they'll be just fine without him. Since they clearly doesn't think Yuka deserves to be paid well, Yuka definitely isn't going to stick around. Yuka has wasted the last 5 years of his life supporting this party, and they would never have gotten this far without his help, but the others still all think he's useless, so they won't miss him at all. Now that Yuka has officially quit Thunderpike, he heads to the guild receptionist to ask if there's any work available. She's surprised that a famous adventurer like him is here to look for a gig, so she asks him if something happened with Thunderpike, and Yuka explains that he quit. The receptionist doesn't seem that surprised since things like this happen all the time, so she hands Yuka a form to fill out so she can give him a new party. Once he's done filling out the form, he hands it to the receptionist, but just then, a girl comes running up to him for a big hug. The girl's name is Marina, and she used to be one of Yuka's students back when he taught preliminary adventurer classes half a year ago, and Yuka is glad she's doing alright. She's curious about why Yuka is here, so she asks him, and he tells her that he is currently looking for a new party since he recently left Thunderpike. Marina doesn't even let him finish his sentence, because if he's looking for a new party, then she would love to have her beloved teacher in hers. Yuka agrees to her proposition, so a few minutes later he is seated with Marina and the rest of her party members so they can discuss his joining. Silk loves the idea of Yuka joining their party, but she is surprised that an experienced adventurer like him wants to join their D-rank party. Yuka is currently B rank, so he could probably get into a much better party, but he doesn't mind being in a D-rank party, and to be honest, he actually prefers it this way. Back when he was in Thunderpike, they would always take on high-level missions, so Yuka would have to buy a ton of magic items to prepare, which left him in constant debt. That's why he wants to take it easy for a while, and just deal with some low-level quests instead. Since Marina, Silk, and Rain are all on board with the idea, Yuka officially joins their party, and their first mission together is to collect magic iron ore from the Painto Mine dungeon. It's been a long time since Yuka felt excited to go on a mission like this, and it definitely brings back a lot of old memories from when he was starting out as an adventurer. Yuka recalls that this dungeon has a lot of magic ore veins on the 6th floor, and Silk tells him he is correct, but they were hoping to avoid fighting the 5th floor boss, so Yuka suggests they should start on the 4th floor instead. As they enter the dungeon, Marina takes the lead and uses a stick to check for any traps that may have been set, and Yuka is so proud because she's doing it exactly how he taught her. But for now, he asks her to let him take the lead since he has a more efficient method. Marina doesn't understand what he means since their party doesn't have a scout or thief to detect the traps, but while that may be true, Yuka has a magic item that should be useful in this situation. It's a detection lamp, and thanks to a special type of oil, it illuminates traps, so they can spot them just like a scout would. The lamp really is useful, but Silk asks if it's okay for Yuka to be using it since special oil sounds really expensive. And yes, It normally is, but Yuka made this oil with his alchemy, so it didn't cost him much. The party continues walking down the corridor while carefully avoiding all the traps, until eventually, Yuka stops everyone because he can sense something up ahead. He warns the others and tells them that they should prepare for a fight, so they all rush in together and are confronted by a group of boggles. Silk decides to take the initiative and fires the first shot to take one of the boggles down, while Marina runs in to handle the rest. As she does this, Yuka casts overlapping physical enchantments on her so she can fight better, and at the same time, he casts a debuff on the boggles to trip them up. While the boggles are disoriented, Marina goes in for her attack, and in one fluid motion, she is able to cut both of them in half, something even she is surprised by. She turns around to ask Yuka if that feeling she just experienced was his magic, so Yuka confirms that he had cast 3 types of enchantment on Marina to help with her fight. Rain can't believe Yuka was able to cast 3 enchantments at once, and on top of that, he managed to do it with no incantation, but Yuka doesn't think it was all that impressive, so he just says they should keep moving. As they continue through the mine, he asks the girls about their usual dungeon exploration routine, so Marina proudly explains that they always take a break after each floor and check their equipment, just like he taught them to do. Since that's the case, Yuka suggests that they should rest a bit before they continue. After their break, Marina and the others check all their equipment for damage and everything seems to be in working order, so they are ready to continue their mission and head down to the next floor. On the second floor of the dungeon, the group is suddenly ambushed by a group of undead miners, and the only way to get rid of them is for Rain to use holy magic, so everyone needs to protect her while she uses her chant. Marina and Silk plan to handle the defense, but Yuka tells them he has this covered, so he casts a blessing of light on all of them. And while it won't kill the undead miners, it does stop them from coming any closer, so it's a good defensive measure. Eventually, Rain finishes the holy light spell and uses it to eradicate the undead, and once they are safe, Marina begins praising Rain for a job well done. Yuka praises her as well since there aren't many people who can use light magic on the scale that Rain just did, but doing that probably drained a ton of her mana, so he casts Refresh Mana to help her recover. Rain can't believe Yuka can use Refresh Mana since that's a really rare skill. It completely restores the mana of whomever it is cast on, and having that skill alone would make Yuka insanely valuable to any party that works with him. But Yuka thinks she's exaggerating a little because he only learnt Refresh Mana as a way to compensate for having an obscure job like a red mage, although it was really difficult for him to learn it. Afterwards, the group continues walking down the path, and as they go, Yuka begins pouring a liquid on the ground. Silk asks him what he's doing, so Yuka explains that he is pouring holy water over their footprints in order to stop undead monsters from following them. Silk is worried and asks if it's really okay for him to waste his holy water like that since it's really expensive. But Yuka tells her it's fine since once again he made this himself. The group is in shock that Yuka is able to make holy water even though he isn't a priest, but he has a special method for it. By purifying the ashes left behind by the undead when they are defeated, Yuka is able to process it into holy water, and the ashes he got from the undead miners will be more than enough to make up for the amount of holy water he's using. By the time they finally make it to the 3rd floor, Yuka suggests that they should take another break since they'll begin mining from this point forward. And since they haven't eaten for a while, he whips out some cooking utensils from his magic bag and says he will make them a meal. Magic bags aren't that rare, but this is Rain's first time seeing a magic bag in person, so she's really excited. Yuka puts some sausage and eggs in a pan, and while that's cooking up, he pulls out a special pot. The girls watch as he taps on the side of the pot and it instantly fills up, so Yuka explains that the pot is a rare artifact that he found in a royal palace ruin. It basically fills up with a random soup every time you use it, so it's really handy to have. The girls are really grateful to Yuka since this is the first time they've gotten to have such a good meal while in the middle of a dungeon mission. But when Silk takes a closer look at the food, she realizes that it has mana radiating out of it. She asks Yuka about it, but he tells her there's nothing special about the food since all he did was prepare it with lots of love. His alchemy skills might have accidentally enchanted the food, however, it shouldn't be a problem. The group eventually makes it to the 4th floor of the dungeon and are confronted by a rock lizard, but as the monster charges at them, Yuka casts a slow spell on it, so it practically freezes in place. Marina then rushes forward to attack, and normally she wouldn't risk it, but since Yuka's enchantments have buffed her strength and stamina, she decides to try using her magic blade ability, and with it, she is able to slice the rock lizard's head off in one go. Once the fight is over, Marina is totally exhausted since Magic Blade uses up a ton of her mana, but Yuka encourages her to keep using it as much as possible, because eventually her body will get used to it. But for now, he casts Refresh Mana to help her recover. Anyway, there are a lot of magic ores here, so Yuka begins mining with the girls, and after a little while, they manage to gather a ton of magic ores. Yuka asks if this is enough to fulfill the requirements of their quest, but Silk says they actually need a bit more. Unfortunately, there are no more magic ores on this floor, so their only option now is to defeat the 5th floor boss and go down to the 6th floor to gather the remaining ores. The girls don't like the sound of that since the 5th floor boss is called the Novice Crusher Steel Crab, and they aren't sure they can survive against something like that, but Yuka tells them they don't need to worry since he will do his best to handle a boss on his own. A little while later, they arrive at the boss's room, but before they head in, Yuka pulls out a camera artifact. Rain recognizes the artifact and asks if Yuka plans to livestream his battle, but he was actually just going to record instead. He always records his battles so he can study his mistakes later, if he's going to be recording anyway. Marina asks him to make it a live stream since she thinks it will be a lot of fun. Yuka is fine with live streaming his fight, but while he's setting it up, he realizes he doesn't know the name of this party. He asks them, but Silk tells him they haven't actually thought of a party name yet, and in fact, they aren't even officially registered yet. Since that's the case, he asks them if they've got any good ideas for a team name, so Marina thinks for a second and comes up with the name Clover. Specifically, a 4-leaf clover to represent their 4 members, and everyone really likes the name, so from now on, they shall be known as Clover. Just then, Yuka realizes that this is going to be her party's first live stream, and he feels bad if he was the only one who got a spotlight, so he asks the others if they want to help him fight the boss, but they all tell him that it's fine for him to handle it solo. In that case, Yuka isn't going to hold back, so he casts great Blink Shadow and Protector Shield buffs on himself, and then enters the boss room. The Steel Crab awakens and immediately tries to strike Yuka, but he uses his speed buffs to dodge, and once he's out of the crab's range, he begins casting tons of debuff spells on it. And once the crab is sufficiently weakened, he casts a gravity spell to crush it against the floor. With this, the Steel Crab boss has been defeated, and it didn't even take him 1 minute to do it, so Yuka is pleased with his performance. He then ends the stream and Marina runs up to hug him for being so amazing. But she's hugging him a little too hard, so the others ask her to let go before Yuka ends up in a wheelchair. After making sure his back is fine, Yuka tells everyone that they should bring the Steel Crab's body back to the guild so they can sell the parts. He stores the entire things in his magic bag, and that's a huge help since they never would have been able to carry it back by themselves. So far, Yuka has been indispensable to their party, but Silk doesn't think it's fair for them to constantly be relying on Yuka like this, so Yuka suggests that next time they have a boss battle, everyone can participate so they'll gain some experience. The girls like the sound of that, but for now, they still have to open the treasure chest they get for killing the floor boss, and when they do, they find a ton of magic ores, so it looks like they won't have to mine anymore after all. Dungeon streams are really popular all around the world as they are a great source of publicity, so big companies often offer sponsorship deals to popular streamers. And right now, Yuka's popularity is at an all-time high because the video of him defeating the Steel Crab with nothing but status effect spells has gone viral. Meanwhile, Yuka and the others are returning home, and while on the carriage, Yuka asks them what they thought of their first mission together, and the girls absolutely loved it. They learned all sorts of cool things from Yuka, so this was easily the best mission they've completed so far. In fact, they were all thinking of making Yuka the official leader of their party since he has the most experience, and they all trust him with their lives since he was their teacher. Yuka is hesitant to accept the role since he never intended to take over Marina's party, but since they all say they want him to do it, he ends up agreeing, mostly so he can ensure their safety in future battles. While Yuka's party is celebrating their first victory, Thunder Pike is suffering a crushing defeat. Simon hired a new guy to replace Yuka after he quit, but you must still not realize how much Yuka was carrying their party because he led them right into wolf territory and expected everything to just work out. Normally, Yuka would have cast a weakening spell in the wolves by now, but the new guy can't do that, so the wolves are way too strong for the party to handle, and as a result, Jamie gets chomped. Simon sees her in trouble and rushes to save her by decapitating the wolf, and while Jamie is technically safe now, her stomach is full of holes, so she'll die if she doesn't get help soon. Simon asks Camilla to cast a healing spell on Jamie, but Camilla says she's out of mana, so there's nothing she can do. It's not like they had a guide who could cast a mana restoration spell, did they? The group retreats to safety and Simon administers first aid to try and keep Jamie alive while Camilla's mana recharges. He asks if anyone has a healing potion and the new guy, Cork, has one, but he doesn't feel like giving it to Simon since Simon made it painfully clear that he was responsible for buying his own equipment with his own money. Simon tells him that now's not the time to be worrying about money when one of his teammates is about to die, so Cork reluctantly hands over the healing potion and Simon feeds it to Jamie. Thunder Pike has really been on a downward spiral lately, but on the flip side, everything has been working out for Yuka. He and the girls are sitting at the bar to celebrate, and while the reward for their quest wasn't that high, the Steel Crab's body was in good condition, so the guild paid a good price for it. Speaking of money, Yuka asks Marina and the others what system they've been using to split up the party's earnings, so they tell them that Silk usually handles all the party's money and each member gets a set allowance. Yuka is a little surprised since it's rare for a party to entrust all the money to a single member, but the group has a reason for that. They've all been saving up so they can eventually afford to buy a house as a party, since it's a little awkward to have to be renting at the inn all the time. Since they are trying to save their money, Yuka tells them it's fine if they continue with the allowance system. Silk asks if he is really okay with her handling all the finances since she thought an adventurer like him would want to handle his own money, but Yuka trusts her, so there's no reason to change the system they already have. While Yuka and the other are having fun and getting along, Simone and the rest of Thunder Pike are upset because that was the worst outcome they had in years. Thankfully, they were able to save Jamie's life, but things could have gone really badly, and Simone blames it all on Cork. The rest of the party get in on it and start calling Cork useless for not being able to get them out of that mess, but Cork isn't going to let them put the blame on him since everyone knows that dire wolves track their prey through scent, so it's common sense to buy a scent blocker in preparation for the mission. This is clearly the party's fault for not being prepared for the situation, but Simone tries to turn it around on Cork and says that if he knew about the scent blockers, then he should have told them. And the fact that Jamie almost died is entirely his fault too because he didn't buy scent blockers for the entire party. The gaslighting is strong with this one. But thankfully, it's not strong enough to fool Corks, so he realizes he wants no part in a party where no one is willing to take accountability for their mistakes and quits on the spot. Yuka overhears this, and he can't believe Thunder Pike still hasn't learned from their mistakes, but that doesn't concern him anymore. He turns back to the girls, and Marina tells everyone what they should do for tomorrow. Silk remembers something Yuka once told her about it being important to take a day off after every mission, so she suggests that they do that. Everyone agrees, and since Yuka is going to have the day off, he decides to get a little shopping done. He needs to stock up on potions and scrolls, and he still needs to turn those undead ashes he got into holy water so he can replenish his stock. He's going to be busy for a while, so he suggests that they all meet back up here after their break is over. Just then, Marina notices that the dungeon stream highlights of the day are being shown, and Yuka's fight against the steel crab is number 1. He is shocked since he only uploaded it a couple of hours ago, but it already has over 5,000 viewers, and it's still going up. People find it really interesting that someone with an obscure job like a red mage was able to take down a red crab without even needing to touch it. The announcers tell everyone to keep an eye on Yuka and his party, Clover, because they just might become the world's greatest party. Simone and the other members of Thunder Pike see Yuka's stream as well, and they are all incredibly jealous that Yuka is actually doing well without them, but they still refuse to admit that Yuka might have been more useful to them than they gave him credit for. Thunder Pike is always going to be a bunch of haters, but it looks like there is actually someone else hating on Yuka from a distance, and he seems mad that Yuka is getting comfortable with his new party. A couple of days later, Yuka is back in the guild, and he's looking at the notice board to see if he can find any quests that will be good for the girls. The receptionist sees him struggling to decide, so she comes over and asks if she can help. Yuka asks her if there are any quests that are easy enough for a party of noobs, but also paying a decent amount of money. The receptionist tells him that he is being a little too optimistic here. He's never going to find such a perfect quest, but given the circumstances, she points to a C-rank quest that involves fetching some magic stones from the Orden Forest. Yuka thinks this just might work, but he's a little curious as to why the quest is C-rank when fetching magic stones will usually only be D-rank. The receptionist explains that there has been a large magical beast sighted near the forest, so this quest is slightly more dangerous than normal. Just then, Marina enters the guild, and as soon as she hears the word quest, she immediately yells that their party will accept it. Yuka asks her to at least let him finish explaining before she agrees to do the quest, but Marina says she doesn't need to know the details since if Yuka thinks they can handle it, then she is sure they'll be able to get it done. It shouldn't be too hard anyway since she and the others have done a quest in that forest before, although she doesn't understand why this quest would be C-rank when all the other quests are D-rank. This is when Yuka chimes in and says that the quest is C-rank because there is a magic beast living somewhere in that forest now. Hearing that there's a magical beast in the forest makes the girls reconsider whether it's a good idea to take that quest after all, but they ultimately decide to just go with it anyway since if Yuka is with them, then they are sure everything will work out in the end. In that case, Yuka tells them all to get their items ready and to meet him an hour later in front of the stagecoach so they can head to the forest. Just then, the receptionist returns with the quest receipt, and all this seems a little too convenient, so he asks the receptionist if she planned things so they would end up like this, and she doesn't deny having some part in this. The stream Yuka made yesterday ended up earning him more than 10,000 fans, and they are all eager to see Yuka's next stream. Yuka is a little embarrassed since he hadn't realized his stream would earn him so much attention. He sees no harm in continuing to stream his fights since he'll bring attention to the girls. And if they happen to find that magical beast, having it on video would be great for the guild's records. While Yuka was talking about all this, the man from before is getting more and more infuriated, so as Yuka leaves the guild, he follows him. Yuka immediately realizes that he's being followed since the guy doing it is doing a terrible job at it, so he ducks into an alleyway to get away. He was hoping to lose his stalker, but for a fat guy, he's pretty quick and catches up to Yuka. Yuka asks him if he has any business with him, so the man demands that Yuka quit Clover immediately. Yuka obviously says that's not going to happen, especially since he's the leader of the party. The guy can't believe those girls would make Yuka their leader after just one day together, even though they offered to join their party $1 million, and they kept turning him down. Yuka understands what's going on here. This guy wanted to get himself a harem of cute adventurer girls, but Marina and the others refused to let him join, and now seeing another guy live his dream has made him irrational. The man draws his sword to attack if Yuka doesn't agree to leave the girls' party, so Yuka quietly casts a snare trap at the man's feet and then turns to walk away. As Yuka is walking away, the man really does try to attack him, but Yuka's trap causes him to slip and fall on the ground. Once he's on the carriage, he talks to the girls about his random encounter. They recognize the guy as Bizio and tell Yuka that the guy has been trying to join their party for so long. They ask if Yuka is alright since they would hate it if something bad were to happen to him because of them. But Yuka assures them it is not their fault, and besides, he left that guy unconscious in the middle of the street, so they can just report him when they get back to town. In the meantime, before they get to their destination, Yuka wants to go over their mission objective one last time. They are going to fetch 3 magic stones from the Orden Forest, and since the others say they've been here before, he asks them what it was like when they got here. According to Marina, they had been here 2 months ago, but now that she thinks about it, she didn't run into any monsters at all. After hearing this, Yuka realizes that the magical beast must have already been in the forest 2 months ago, and if they encounter it, he's going to be live streaming. This way, the guild gets valuable information about the beast, and in the event that they can't defeat it, it'll be easy to call for backup if needed. Once they arrive in the forest, Yuka begins the stream and the group starts making their way through the forest. Yuka decided to be the rear guard since beasts usually attack from behind, but Marina asks if it's really alright for him to be at the rear since he's in the most danger there. Yuka tells her she doesn't need to worry since not only can he use Blink Step to get away if his life really is in danger, his clothes also have really good defense stats, so he can take a couple of hits before he goes down. They soon reach the waterfall where they are meant to gather the magic stones, but just before they could reach there, Yuka tells everyone to wait because he can sense something coming. The magic beast finally reveals itself, but all the confidence Yuka had earlier goes about the window because that thing is a high-level monster that's usually only found in the deepest parts of the dungeon, Azarnag. The girls are nowhere near strong enough to handle this thing or even survive a minute against it, so Yuka gets in front of them and tells Silk to lead the others back to the Adventurers Guild and get back up while he holds this thing off here. However, the girls know that Yuka doesn't stand a chance against that thing either if he is fighting solo, so they refuse to leave his side, otherwise he might really die. Yuka can't really argue with that, so he agrees to have them fight with him, and cast his enchantment spells on them. He and Marina are handling the front line, so Marina charges forward first, but the Zarnag swats her away effortlessly. Yuka tries to use his layered status effects on it, and while it does disorient the Zarnag, it doesn't do much damage to it, so he's running low on options. Right now, there's only one thing in his arsenal that can stop this thing, so Yuka decides to go all or nothing. However, he will need Marina to buy him some time so he can finish casting the spell. Marina agrees to distract the beast so she gets up close to it and does her best to keep its attention while dodging its attacks. And even when she's about to get caught, Silk and Rain assist with their magic. Thanks to their combined efforts, Yuka had enough time to finish casting the level 5 spell, a highly destructive prismatic missile, and now that it's complete, Yuka fires it straight at the beast's face. This was the end of episode 2. Subscribe to not miss the next part.